Hello everyone, we are team number 1 conformed by Jason Galvan and Cristina Lopez. In this video we are going to talk about total physical response and the silent way. Talking about the background of this method, we can say that was developed by James Asher, a professor of psychology at San Jose State University in California. He claimed that speech directed to young children consists primarily of commands which children respond to physically before they begin to produce verbal responses. Then we have the theory of language. Usher states that most of the grammatical structure of the target language and hundreds of vocabulary items can be learned from the skillful use of the imperative by the instructor. He views the verb and particularly the verb in the imperative of the central linguistic around which language use and learning are organized. Then, when we talk about the theory of learning, she draws on three rather influential learning hypotheses. The first one is that there exists a specific innate bioprogram for language learning which defines an optimal path for first and second language development. The second one, brain lateralization, defines different learning functions in left and right brain hemispheres. The third one is that stress intervenes between the act of learning and what is to be learned. The lower the stress, the greater. The objective of this approach are to teach oral proficiency at the beginning level. Now that we know the objective, we can talk about the syllabus. Total physical response requires initial attention to meaning rather than to the form of items. Grammar is taught inductively. Grammatical features and vocabulary items are selected not according to the frequency of need or in use in target language situations, but according to the situations in which they can be used in the classroom and the ease with which they can be learned. The next step is the types of learning and teaching activities. They can be imperative drills as the major classroom activity in total physical response. Then we have role plays centered on everyday situations such as the restaurant, the supermarket, or the gas station. And we can also implement slide presentations providing a visual center for teachers' narrations, which is followed by commands and for questions to students. Then we have learner's role. They have the primary roles of listener and performer. They listen attentively and respond physically to commands given by the teacher. Learners are required to respond both individually and collectively. Learners have little influence over the content of learning, and the content is determined by the teacher who must follow imperative-based format. In the opposite side, we have the teacher role. The teacher decides what to teach, who models and presents the new materials, and who selects supporting materials for classroom use. The teacher is encouraged to be well prepared and well organized so that the lesson flows smoothly and predictably. And last, we have the instructional materials. For beginner lessons may not require the use of material since the teacher voice, actions, and gestures might be a sufficient basis for classroom activities.
The Silent Way is the name of a method of language teaching devised by Caleb Gattegno. It is based on the premise that the teacher should be silent as much as possible in the classroom, and the learner should be encouraged to produce as much language as possible. The learning hypothesis of the silent way could be stated in the following way. Learning is facilitated if the learner discovers or creates rather than remembers and repeats what is to be learned. Learning is facilitated by accompanying physical objects, and learning is facilitated by problem solving involving the material to be learned. Gattegno views language itself as a substitute for experience, so experience is what gives meaning to language. He also says that it is important to grasp the spirit of language, and not only its component forms. By spirit, Gattegno is referring to the way each language is composed of phonological and suprasegmental elements that combine to give language its unique sound system and melody. Gattegno sees vocabulary as a central dimension of language learning, and the choice of it as crucial. He distinguishes between several classes of vocabulary items. The semi-luxury vocabulary or functional vocabulary consists of expressions common in the daily life of the target language culture, for example food, clothing, family life, etc. And the luxury vocabulary is used in communicating more specialized ideas, such as political or philosophical opinions. Gattegno says that a successful second language approach should be an artificial one that is in some cases strictly controlled. This artificial approach is based on the principle that successful learning involves commitment of the self to language acquisition through the use of silent awareness and then active trial. The self consists of two systems. The learning system is activated only by way of intelligent awareness. The learner must constantly test his powers to abstract, analyze, synthesize, and integrate. Silence is considered the best vehicle for learning because in silence, students concentrate on the task to be accomplished and the potential means to its accomplishment. The retaining system allows us to remember and recall at will linguistic elements and their organizing principles, and makes linguistic communication possible. Gattegno speaks of remembering as a matter of paying ogdens. An ogden is a unit of mental energy required to link permanently two mental elements. Awareness is educable, and the silent way is useful to reach that goal, since it provides learners with the opportunity to acquire inner criteria, such as attention, production, self-correction, and absorption. The general objective of the silent way is to give beginner-level students oral and oral facility in basic elements of the target language. Gattegno states that the silent way teaches learners how to learn a language, and the skills developed through the process of learning a second language can be employed dealing with unknowns of every type. The silent way adopts a structural syllabus, with lessons planned around grammatical items and related vocabulary. Language items are introduced according to the grammatical complexity, the relationship to what has been taught previously, and the ease with which items can be presented visually. Vocabulary is selected according to the degree to which it can be manipulated within a given structure, and according to its productivity within a classroom setting. Learning tasks and activities in the silent way have the function of encouraging and shaping student oral response, without direct oral instruction or necessary modeling by the teacher. The basic sequence goes from a simple modeling task, and from that to students go on and create their own utterances. Teacher modeling is minimal, although much of the activity may be teacher-directed. Responses to commands, questions, and visual cues constitute the basis of classroom activities. The learner first experiences a random feeling of the area of activity in question, until one finds one or more cornerstones to build on. Then starts a systematic analysis, first by trial and error and later by directed experiment, with practice of the acquired sub-areas until mastery follows. Learners exert a strong influence over each other's learning, since they are expected to interact with each other and suggest alternatives or corrections to each other. The silent way teacher, like a dramatist, writes the script, chooses the props, sets the mood, models in the action, designates the players, and is critic for the performance. Teachers are responsible for designing teaching sequences and creating individual lessons and lesson elements, creating an environment that encourages student risk-taking and that facilitates learning. The teacher first acts as a pantomimist and a puppeteer, using gestures, charts, and manipulatives in order to shape and elicit student responses, and then becomes a natural observer and disinterested judge, leaving students struggling and becoming aware of the language. The materials consist mainly of a set of colored rods, color-coded pronunciation and vocabulary charts, a pointer, and reading and writing exercises, all of which are used to illustrate the relationships between sound and meaning in the target language. A Silent Way lesson follows a standard format. The first part of the lesson focuses on pronunciation. Later, the teacher will silently point out individual symbols and combinations of symbols and monitor students' utterances. After practice with the sound of the language, sentence pattern, structure, and vocabulary are practiced. After a structure is introduced and understood, the teacher creates a situation in which the students can practice the structure through the manipulation of words, which are like flashcards with different elements each, and that can be manipulated to create different sentences.